Innovations in communication and technology. We've got 3 different topics we're covering today. Explain the causes and effects of the innovations in communication and technology in the United States over time. We're going to talk about radio in the 1920s and the huge effect it has on culture. Topic 7.8, cultural and political controversies. So explain the causes and effects of international and internal migration patterns over time. For example, the Great Migration. Many African Americans moving from the South, leaving sharecropping behind, coming up to the North for factory jobs. That starts, mid World War One, and continues throughout the 20s. And then also explain the causes and effects of developments in popular culture in the United States over time. We're going to get mass culture. Everybody knows Jack Dempsey's having a big fight on the radio today. Everybody having these major cultural events that are broadcasted on the radio, and everyone part of it, creating a kind of national mass culture. So it's called the Roaring Twenties. The 1920s, the Roaring Twenties. We just got out of a war, a devastating war. Just got out of the Spanish flu. The war killed 20 million people. The Spanish flu, 50 million people to potentially 100 million. So there's a lot of loss of life. People want to forget that and put it behind them. President Warren G. Harding gets elected, and he gets elected on the idea of a return to normalcy. We're going to go back to some sense of normal after these terrible events. We become the richest and most developed country in the world because of our role in the war, producing armaments and selling them to the Allied powers. We become mass producers. We have higher wages. We have new consumer goods we're producing. It is a roaring time. All right, my question to you right off the bat. A return to normalcy. That's the campaign slogan of Harding. What is a return to normalcy for people at this time? What do you think? What is a return to normal in this situation? And it's pretty much opposite everything that was going on before, right? We're in the middle of a war. During that war, we were told to conserve, eat less, waste less, electricity, waste less oil, conserve. Conserve your money, conserve your food. We need to send it over to the Allies. So the 1920s, it's going to be the opposite of that. Don't conserve, spend, use, live. Sorry, I'm just checking in on attendance. Hey, that's okay. I'm actually just doing attendance now, so don't worry. Okay. Don't worry about this question. Just think about it for a second. You don't have to type anything because we just did one. But what does this image reveal about America in the 1920s? We see Uncle Sam in the back there representing America, and he says, and they're the leading members of the League of Nations to promote world peace. And if you look at the world leaders, they're spreading the seeds of future wars, according to what it says on their bags there. Seeds of future wars, and they're spreading it across Europe. Remember, we are not signing the Treaty of Versailles. Congress did not approve of it because of the League of Nations, mainly, thinking that the League was going to make us too involved in European affairs. Potentially, there was a chance that since the League of Nation members are supposed to kind of protect each other, watch out for each other, that if something was going on in the North American continent, the Monroe Doctrine would be threatened because the League of Nations would say, "Uh-oh, we need to go and bail out this Latin American country," and so we didn't want to be part of that agreement for many reasons. One of which the foreign entanglements getting too messy. So, what is the opposite? What are we going to try to do if we just fought a war? We're going to try to pull out of foreign relations in the future. We want to return to normalcy. We want to return to like isolationism. George Washington, his farewell address, it set a standard for isolationism, basically. We want to return to that ideal of not getting entangled in foreign alliances. But we don't do too well with it. In the next slide, you'll see, we do actually continue to get involved. But some examples of isolationism at the time, we never signed the Treaty of Versailles. Therefore, we never joined the League of Nations. The popular feeling at the time was that we got tricked kind of into having to fight World War I. We wanted to remain neutral, but we got dragged in. We don't want to do that again. But that isolationism was selective in that we still did get very involved in foreign affairs. One example, the Washington Naval Conference in 1921 to 22, it was an attempt to try to reduce armaments of navies, um, and we hosted it. So some of the things that came out of that, the 5-power treaty, 4-power treaty, and 9-power treaty. The 5-power treaty, it tried to maintain a ratio where we had the most battleships, the big ships. U.S. could have 5, Great Britain 5, Japan 3, France 1.67, Italy 1.67. The 4-power treaty was an agreement that we are all going to respect each other's specific territories: U.S., France, Great Britain, Japan. Um, and then the 9-power treaty was acknowledging the open door policy officially again, and saying that we have to respect this free trade with China for any countries um, that are wanting to do that. And then the Dawes Plan is another huge example of how we do get involved. We're not isolationists at all with the Dawes Plan. After World War I, all these European countries were in major debt. Germany, the most of all, because they get single-handedly blamed for the war, according to the Treaty of Versailles. So now Germany has to pay all these reparations, all these like war debts for all these other countries. They are in major debt. They're not able to pay their reparations. So Britain and France, for example, can't get the reparations from Germany, and then Britain and France can't pay us because they took out many loans from us, as well as owed us a lot of money for our armaments that we were selling them leading up to the war. So here's the plan. Um, you know, big financial minds at the time, including Charles Dawes, an eventual Vice President Charles Dawes is where this plan gets its name from. Dawes, the Dawes Plan is where we are going to give Germany loans. Germany will use these loans to pay their reparation fines to Britain and France and Allied powers. Then Britain and France will take those war reparations from Germany and use them to pay back us for the war loans that they took from us originally. So it all comes back to us, giving us billions of dollars in credit. We become a creditor nation rather than a debtor nation. So countries owe us. We went into this being a country that owed others, and we came out of it being a country that uh, others owed us. We became a creditor to others, and it worked for a while. But you know, it's going to cause more devastation financially for European powers when the Great Depression is in full swing, and the Great Depression really hits the world. But um, it becomes even harder for them to pay back reparations at that point and to pay back loans at that point. But we're going to continue to try to push that along. Another example of foreign policy at the time, we, along with other nations, signed the Kellogg-Briand Pact. So, U.S. Secretary of State Frank Kellogg, French Foreign Minister Aristide Briand, they signed a pact that basically it had no like executive force behind it. It didn't have force to where if someone broke it, there would be uh, clear executive kind of punishment. But it was a nice lofty goal. The goal was countries would renounce aggressive use of force to achieve national ends, and try to be more diplomatic with each other. However, it allowed fighting defensive wars, and you could pretty much connect everything back to a defensive war in a lot of situations. And oh, this was a defensive war we had to fight. I mean, even World War One, could Austria say it was a defensive war? You could argue that because Princip having Serbian nationalists having assassinated their heir apparent, um, to the throne of Austro-Hungarian Empire, like that is an assault on them. So they could say that it's a defensive war against Serbia. Um, so it really didn't prove to be effective, but it was a nice thought. All right, so that's the foreign policies. Domestic means at home, right? So domestic policies at the time at home. What's it like? During this time, we're going to get a streak of Republican presidents that start with Warren G. Harding. And according to the political cartoon on the left, according to the quote from Harding's uh, VP and eventually President, Calvin Coolidge, when Harding dies, um, it really kind of presents the theme of the time for domestic policy. What is it? So I have a question for you, a paradox question. Go ahead and type in your answer. What does this image and quote reveal about America in the 1920s? Let's check it out. So the quote says, the chief business of the American people is business. And then to the left, we have a bunch of uh, wealthy businessmen singing a song and it like kind of miming like they're playing a piano, but it's actually a cash register because they are rich and wealthy. And they're singing a song that the chorus is, "What a friend we have in Coolidge." What do you think the theme of the era was with domestic policy? So it's very pro business. Um, Prior to the progressive era in World War One, we had a very laissez-faire governmental approach where we were very letting business do what it had to do to be successful, but then it led to monopolies and a lot of aggressive competitive tactics that were not fair, and also a lot of reasons for workers to want to create labor unions because they were being abused. So during the progressive era, we fixed a lot of that up. Americans feel like we made a lot of progress, and they become more willing to let leaders rein back a little bit and allow business more freedoms again. Um, so we lay off the trust busting of Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson times, and we become a little bit more business friendly, a lot more business friendly. Um, so Harding, he runs on this campaign of return to normalcy. We're going to bring us back to some sort of sense of normalcy after all the death of World War One and Spanish flu. They're going to cut taxes with the idea that if people have to pay less taxes, they'll spend more. And they also rein back the interventions on businesses because they figure, um, if businesses are thriving, then they're going to hire more people, and there'll be some form of effect that helps everybody out, middle class and lower class included. That's the thought. We also lose Teddy Roosevelt. In 1919, Teddy dies, and he is a major progressive force at the time, but losing him means we're going to lose that progressive push. A lot of it. He was a voice of progressivism. So his death allows a little bit more, uh, or takes the gas off the progressive movement a bit. Um, Pro business policies crop up more and more. Americans themselves just generally feel that we made a lot of progress in regulating businesses, and we could pull back a bit. Workers' wages went up. Hourly requirement of daily labor hours went down. People were happier and able to have an income to spend on things. Yeah, there's two images here. What do they reveal about America? On the right, we have per person, per capita, per head income, and watch it rise throughout the 1920s. And then you see in 1929, goes right back down for the Great Depression. But during the 1920s, it's looking great. Everyone's incomes are rising. There will still be a huge disparity between the wealthiest and the poor, and that gap will grow and grow and grow. But in general, wages are going up for the vast majority of Americans, and people start to spend because they feel confident that they have a job, they have a good wage. Spend, spend, spend. And we have a lavish party. Great Gatsby is written during this time. Um, this is a Gatsby-like party. People are living it up, spending, no longer conserving like they were during the war, but so they're living large. During this time, we also have the advent of really aggressive commercial advertisements. Um, People have money to spend, so businesses want to take advantage of that. They put their products out there in every way they can. Magazines now with radio. Radio is now the popular means of everyone's buying radios in the 1920s, so it's a popular means of getting your ad out there. In fact, you guys have all heard of soap operas, and you're probably like, where did that come from? A bunch of soap companies, mainly laundry detergent and hand soap companies, they started buying up time on the radio, and they would they would pay for the production of radio shows that were dramatic and interesting for the housewives at the time, and they would run these during the weekdays when it was just the housewives home. They would be listening to these dramatic radio plays, radio theater, and then they would have commercial breaks where the laundry detergent and soap companies would try to sell their stuff. So we get these dramatic soap operas, trying to sell their soaps during the commercials, but have these dramatic theatrical radio shows. It's within. So aggressive campaigns for ads, and people are falling for it. I mean, they have disposable income because wages are going up and there's more jobs than before. So people start to get so confident that they buy on credit. Buying on credit, money that you don't have, but you buy on credit. People are buying a lot of their household items on credit. They're also buying installment plans, which is similar. It's the idea of put $5 down today, and then you could have the device, but pay $8 every month after that to keep it for a year. So $5 down today, $8 every month thereon for a year, and you get to have. So people are doing that too, and it's good. It's fine as long as a Great Depression isn't around the corner, and people are going to lose their jobs and not be able to pay these creditors, and that's ultimately what happens, right? So this is going to build to a very terrible turn in the 1930s, well, 1929, when people have to answer for the credit they took. Automobiles, they change culture. It's an escape. It's Henry Ford is able to make automobiles way less expensive because he has an assembly line process that is, instead of having workers build a car, every part of the car they're working on, he splits up the job. He makes it like stations basically along an assembly line. Each worker gets really good at one specific task and is able to make do that task in a phenomenal time. being able to pass the car down the line to the next person who does the next task. So the Model T car, or the Tin Lizzie, it goes from being $850 in 1908 to dropping in price to only $290 in 1924. So more Americans buy it. In 1916, 1 million people had cars on the road. By 1920, 8 million. By 1929, 23 million. With more cars on the road, the government has to put more roads, has to build more roads. So government spending goes up in paving highways for everybody across the nation. 10,000 miles of paved highway by 1929, in fact. And this whole assembly line idea, it's coming from that production element, that that Taylorism. If you remember, the researcher who basically timed workers during the Progressive era tried to figure out exactly how to, Frederick Taylor, how to get the most out of your workers. That goes in towards this assembly line idea. Automobiles change culture. If you want to, hang out with your friends or go on a date, the car was your escape. Because there's more cars out on the road, you need gas stations. So gasoline demand goes up. Companies like rubber companies, steel companies, glass companies, more demand for that too, because cars need, glass, steel, and rubber, and oil for the gas. So there's more demand for all these items that are needed in to run your car. Last question. Oh, all right, time. We're out of time, so I won't require you on this one to do this, but provide an example of how consumerism was fed. Think about it. That is it for today. See you guys tomorrow for our guest speaker.